Hey guys, it is time for me to tell you all about the books that I read in the month of July. Stick around while I talk about all of these books. There's a lot of them. So grab a drink, grab a snack, because we may be here a while. Hey y'all, it's Jen and welcome back to my channel Ifra's Inklings. Today I am going to be talking about all the books that I read in the month of July. Now, if you've been paying any attention to me on Twitter or on Instagram, you know I read a lot. I officially completed 22 books in the month of July and I DNF'd 2 other ones. So we've got 24 books to talk about today. I am going to be using my cheat sheet in my bullet journal so I don't miss any. I have a pile of books in front of me. A lot of these I checked out through audio from my library, and editing Jen will try and put a picture over here somewhere for the ones that I don't have to show you in front of me. But no guarantees there. So the first one that I read in July was Meet Cute. That is an anthology by a bunch of different young adult authors, and I gave it 3 stars. It wasn't my favorite. There were a few that I really enjoyed of the short stories, but a lot of them just really felt way too short. And then there were some that really just felt rushed and forced. And I just wasn't a fan. So the next book I have to talk about is The Girl Before by J.P. Delaney. I gave this one 4 stars. This is a thriller, and it centers around 2 different timelines that involve the same man and the same house. That it's a really minimalist, technical style house, and it's really creepy as fuck, y'all. This was kind of creepy. Basically, this man would spy on could spy on his renters, and he always rented to the same type of woman. They all looked a lot like his dead wife. So it was creepy. There's obviously a little bit of mystery in it. I'm not going to say anything else about it. I really enjoyed it, and it wasn't so scary that I couldn't sleep at night, but it was creepy enough that I was like, maybe I don't want to live in a smart house. The next one that I listened to this month was Every Morning The Way Home Gets Longer and Longer by Frederick Bachman, and I gave it 4 stars. This is just a short story, and it is about a father-son relationship, and it spans 3 generations. So it's a father, son, father, and grandfather, grandson kind of dynamic there, and it was just gut-wrenching and emotional and impactful, and it talked a lot about the grandfather was really suffering from dementia. I want to say that's kind of what the vibes that I got, although it was really never said specifically. And it was just really about the importance of family and bonding with family, and how as we get older, we forget a lot of things. And when we're younger, we don't understand a lot of things. And it's kind of the combining of the 2 worlds. The next book I listened to was The Reluctant Vampire by Lindsay Sands. This is like I don't know, actually I can tell you. The Reluctant Vampire is the 15th book in the Argano series, and I gave it 4 stars. It was really good. I don't really remember what it was about specifically, because I listened to several of these vampire stories this month. The next one I finished this month was In an Absent Dream by Seanan McGuire. I started this several months ago, and I was just now getting back around to picking it up and finishing it. I gave it 4 stars. I love the Wayward Children series, and this one just wasn't as good as some of the other ones. In this one, we follow Catherine. I want to say. Yeah. Catherine Lundy into the Goblin Market. And she goes back and forth several times through the years. And in the Goblin Market, everything has to be fair. You learn about fair value and fair trade value, and everything you do has to be fair, or the world will punish you in different ways. It turns you into birds. And so we follow this her journey through the years from about age 10 to about age 18, and it's really heartbreaking, and it talks a lot about how kids can feel like they're not being seen by their family or their peers, and oftentimes they're bullied, and so it talks a lot about that. Again, it's the fourth book in the series. I love all of these. This one just wasn't my favorite. I don't know exactly what it was lacking, but there was just something that I just was lacking a little bit. So it was nice to see it come around full circle to where in the end it brings you back to the Wayward Children's Home. The next book that I listened to was Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. I gave this one 5 stars. I listened to a lot of Christina Lauren books this month, so but this one I think was probably my favorite one of them. Christina Lauren is a duo that writes a lot of different books. They write young adult and adult, both, and I think this one was kind of more of that new adult / adult stage. It starts out with our main character that I can't remember her name when she is younger, and she loses her mom at a young age, so her dad is raising her, and her dad are really close, and when her mother dies, her mother has left a list of things at, kind of like a checklist for him, like at this age, or when this starts to happening, do this, or when this happens, do that. And one of the things about it is to take, when you can see her getting overwhelmed, to take their daughter away. And in doing that, instead of just a quick vacation every now and then, he actually ends up buying a vacation home about 2 hours away from their house. And the next door neighbor is one that there's a quiet boy that they end up kind of falling in love with, young love, and it takes them through their journey into college years and adult years, and their path. And what connects them most is books and language, and it just was so emotional and so real and so beautifully told. I really loved this story. The next book I read was a graphic novel, and that is Andre the Giant, Closer to Heaven by Easton Mairdry. And this is a little short graphic novel biography of Andre the Giant, and it really talks a lot about his journey through the boxing. What is it? As a pro wrestler, not boxing. He did do some boxing, but it was pro wrestling. I forget which one it was. Vincent McMahon did it. Anyway, talks about kind of the start of the big wrestling federation that we know it as of today. It didn't always start out that way. And it was really interesting. Andre the Giant is really one of those gentle giants of the world. And it was, having read the memoir of The Princess Bride and getting to know him from that perspective and through those people, it kind of made it full circle and tied it into his wrestling and boxing days as well. So I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 5 stars. So the next one I listened to was also another book by Christina Lauren. It was called The House. I gave it 4 stars. This is a YA mystery thriller type, paranormal type book. It was so interesting and so bizarre. I really loved the characters, and I loved the way the house was described. Basically, this house raised this little boy, and the main character, again, I can't remember names, but it has nothing to do with the amount of books I read this month, because half the time I can't remember my own children's names. It's just a thing. But the two main characters in this, they're high school seniors, and they have had this attraction to each other since they were, oh, kindergarten, really, and just off and on through the years. And the main female character in this book is sent away in like 6th grade to a private boarding school. Well, she comes back for her senior year, and instantly the attraction is there again, and they start to talk. The problem is that this boy, nobody ever sees his family or his parents. It is rumored that his mom ran away, but they don't, or she's a recluse, but they can't ever prove anything. And this house is basically taking care of him and supplies all of everything he needs. Very interesting story. The conclusion of it, it was a little creepy, a little spooky, but I thought it was really an interesting concept, the whole story and the way it panned out, and I found it very intriguing. The next book I listened to was Pulp by Charles Bukowski. You guys know I'm a huge Bukowski fan, and I gave this one 3 stars. Pulp is one of the last books. It is the last book that he wrote right before his death in his 60s, I think. And it's just kind of a weird story. Nothing really ever flowed together. It just was kind of like a lot of ramblings of a cranky old man. And like I said, nothing really flowed together. His other works were more autobiographical, and this one was just not. And you can tell that his strength as a writer is not in novels, and this really shows it. This is kind of considered a noir, I guess, and kind of making fun of the genre. It makes fun of a lot of the classic genres and tropes in literature, and I just didn't feel it. Okay, so that brings us up to another Christina Lauren book that I read this month, and that was Roomies. I gave it 4 stars. I enjoyed it, but quite honestly, I can't tell you anything about it. I think it was a fake dating situation, but I can't even remember. Not that that means it was a bad book. It was just I read a lot of books by them this month, and a lot of romance books, and this one just, even though I enjoyed it immensely, it just didn't stand out to me like some of the other stuff did. The next book I listened to was Dread Nation by Justina Ireland. Again, I gave it 4 stars. This is an alternate history retelling of the Civil War, and it was really good. Through most of the book, there was a lot of nothing happening. It kind of felt like a history lesson. It kind of felt like just getting to know the main character, which is fine. I really love those types of stories. And like I said, I gave this one 4 stars. But there wasn't a lot of action, very little, really, despite what all was happening and going on. It just seemed like a lot of nothing going on, really, honestly. But the premise behind this is like halfway through the Civil War, something happens and it's starting to turn people into zombies. The dead when on the battlefields rose up and started fighting again and eating people and infecting people. And so that is the concept behind this. It's interesting that it's a lot of political stuff. There's not as much fighting as you would expect, but there's a lot of underlying political racism. And again, this was set in the Civil War. So very interesting, very good flow. And I'm definitely gonna read the sequel. Then the next book I finished was A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. I really love these characters. I love all of these characters in this book. I'm not huge on fantasy, but this felt more real than this fantastical, weird space creatures living amongst humans out in space, you know. All of these characters are fantastic. There is great, diverse rep in here, and along all kinds of lines. There's a lot of good commentary on love and the different kinds of love and different types of love, and also on the different prejudices of that people have against people that are different than them. I can't really, not necessarily races, because they were more than just race. There was different species involved, but it really still speaks a lot of prejudice and racism against people that just look different than you, and why that is not necessarily a good thing. I really, really enjoyed the way those concepts were intertwined in just a really well told story. So the next book I listened to was yet again another Christina Lauren book, and that was my favorite half night stand. I gave this one 3.5 stars. I don't remember much about it, although what I do remember about it, I really didn't enjoy. It was a group of friends, and one of and there was only one female character in it, and then the rest were all males. And one of the men and the female fell in love and had been loved. They were best friends and fell in love. That's what that was about. I guess I do remember it. I just didn't like the way this whole thing was told. I can't really pinpoint it, but I just didn't like it as much. I mean, it was good. It was okay. It all worked out in the end, because that's the way it is. It's a friends to lover trope. But there was a lot in the middle that I didn't like. It's a really huge kind of miscommunication trope, and that is just not one that I enjoy. So only 3.5 stars for that one. The next book that I read was an ARC. It came out in early July, and that is The Heartwood Box by Anne Aguirre. I gave this one 4 stars, and I will be doing a formal standalone review on it. But the concept behind this is that there's a small town, that there is something weird going on in it, in the community. Kids are disappearing, not just kids, people are disappearing, never to be seen again. And there is, our main character comes into town to live with her aunt while her parents are off in a torn area doing some journalism. And our main character's uncle is one of the ones that disappeared. He disappeared 20 years ago. But there's still weird stuff going on, and nobody really quite understands it, even where his uncle's concerned. So she starts to kind of investigate this. Lots of action happens. One of the things, though, is she finds a box in one of the upstairs bedrooms that has a letter in it. So she takes the letter and she's reading it, and as for a school assignment, in her new town, she has to write a letter to somebody else. And she writes a letter to respond to the letter that she found in this box, puts both letters in the box, and gets up the next day and the letters have disappeared. And this box is connecting her with a army person, an army man, in the 1800s, right before they go off to World War One. Or maybe it's World War II. I can't remember. I think it's maybe it's World War II because it's about Germany. Germany's mentioned. Anyway, besides all that, so she's corresponding with him back and forth. He's writing letters to her. She's writing letters to him. They don't understand how this is working. And then there's this big conspiracy going on, weird lights that lead into the woods, and just all kinds of weird stuff going on. And there's a little bit of the butterfly effect going on as well. All in all, I really enjoyed this story. It is young adult. I really liked all the characters that we meet in there. They're well written. And Aguirre is the author of a favorite series of mine that I really loved. It was a dystopian series, so I was really excited to get to read this and review it. My complaint about it, the reason it wasn't 5 stars for me, is because there's just a few things that felt really disconnected. And it may be because I had an arc of it and not a final copy of it, but there was some jumping around that I had to go back and I was like, whoa, wait a minute, what just happened? How did we get from this point to this point? You know, it just felt a little disconnected. But all in all, I really enjoyed it. I liked the writing. I liked the characters. I liked the concept of the story. It was really interesting and intriguing, and it kept me wanting to read more and more of it. So definitely check that one out if you like that kind of story. This one is definitely a good one, and like I said, it just came out in July. So the next book I listened to was a short story collection, 2 books, 2 short stories in it. I don't know what you call those, but it was The Bite Before Christmas. The one story was by Lindsay Sands of the Argonaut series, and then the other one was by Jenny Frost, and she writes the I call it the Cat and Bone series. I don't remember the exact title of it, but it's got cat and bones in it. One of my favorite paranormal romance series. So the Lindsay Sands story, I can't remember the names of the individual ones, but her story I only gave 3 stars to. I didn't enjoy it as much. It felt rushed, and it felt really kind of contrived. I like the characters in it. They're characters from other stories, but this one, it didn't mesh with me. The Jenny Frost story, though, oh my gosh, 5 stars. So that makes this book an average out to 4 stars. But Janine Frost's book and short story, her way of telling stories through Cat and Bones, those 2 characters, I just love them. I enjoy her writing, and this short story collection this short story was no exception. It was nice to see a little bit more of Cat and Bones because that series has ended, and I miss those characters so much. So the next book I finished this month was another ARC that I received. I received it a while back. This book came out in January. It is I think it's a YA contemporary romance. I think it's YA. These characters are about that age range. But that'd be You'd Be Mine by Erin Hahn. I gave it 5 stars, and I cannot stop talking about this book. These characters, and again, I can't remember their damn names, but I went to write this review 3 minutes after I finished it, and I still had to look up the names of the main characters. I stayed up and read this book all night long from start to finish. I could not put this book down. I had to know how it was going to end. These characters are, our male main character is Cole, I think is his name. Cole. He is a country singer, star, one of those kind of like, what's his name? I want to say Luke Perry, but that's not it. Luke Bryan. He's one of those Luke Bryan types. So he's got those summer anthem kind of country music songs, the ones that are more upbeat and bad boyish. He's considered like the bad boy of country. And he's young, 19-ish. And he, at the beginning of this book, gets in a lot of trouble. And his record label is like, you got to do something or we're dropping you. But he's like their biggest star, and he's like, whatever, you're not gonna drop me. And he just keeps drinking and getting in trouble and getting into fights and all this. And this, like I said, his record label is just over it. So they tell him, okay, on one condition, you've got one more chance. We're going to do a summer tour, but you have to convince this other girl whose mother was a famous country singer, mother and father both were, who died young, kind of spiraled out of control type of thing, and got into drugs and that lifestyle. And so she has said, even though she's just as talented as her parents, she has said she will never ever go pro or go and be in the spotlight. So she has a band with her best friend, a male best friend, and her best friend who's a female cousin. The three of them have been putting out stuff onto YouTube and is getting a lot of notice because, one, they're good, and two, her family name. So he goes and convinces her to join the tour for the summer. And it's their dynamic. It's kind of an enemies to lovers trope. But their dynamic together is really fun to read about and watch, and you get that kind of insider information, backstage look at the life of a country artist, or I really enjoyed that. So I really loved everything about this book. 5 stars. I can't say enough about it. There is a review on it on my Goodreads, and I plan on eventually doing a full review on it as well. The next book that I listened to was another Lindsay Sands Argonaut series book, and that was Under the Vampire Moon. I gave this one 3.5 stars. I enjoyed it. It was a little different, but probably a little bit better than some of the other ones. I averaged 3 stars for these vampire paranormal romance books, and this one had just a little bit of an interesting additional element to it that made it stand out. This is a woman who is in her mid-40s. I think she's my age, 42, and is going through a divorce from a man who really turned out to be a scam artist, and really it was an abusive relationship, not physically abusive, but that mental and emotional abuse. He was real controlling, it was a real damaging marriage. She has sworn off dating altogether. Well, Marguerite is known to be really good at finding life mates for her family, and so she meets our main character, whose name I can't remember, and Marguerite is like, she's my life mate's son, let's get my son down here, and they contrive a plan, and lo and behold, the storyline goes from there. Like I said, I really enjoyed it. There was a little bit of a twist at the end that I wasn't expecting, and it just made it a little bit more worth the read. And when you're 16 books into a series, you kind of need that. So the next book I listened to was a nonfiction book. It's Everything is Fucked by Mark Manson. I gave it 5 stars, and this was just talking about how everything that we experience in life is really kind of a lie. Not that what we experience is a lie, but that hope that we feel, and we base everything on, and how religion plays into that, and our government plays into that, and all of this other stuff plays into that, when really our lives are pretty good. We just don't know how to recognize that because the stuff in our brains thinks that we need to be better and achieve more and do more, and that will make us happy. And when really we are always kind of on an even keel. Even if we get happy and that thing happens, then after we achieve that or we get that new thing, then we kind of even back out. And even it's true the opposite way. Something horrible happens and we drop down, we're sad, we're depressed, and then we end up evening back out again to kind of a moderate level of happiness. On a scale of 1 to 10, it's like a 7 where we live at all the time. But because we experiences those highs and those lows, we don't we think that we need to stay up at a 10 instead of being content at a 7, if that makes any sense. I don't know how else to explain that, but I found it really fascinating. Like I said, I gave it 5 stars. Normally with self-help type books, I don't. Usually they're all about a 3, but this one was just really good. I enjoyed it. The next book that I listened to was A Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. I gave this 5 stars. Jason Reynolds reads this one himself, and I think that is really, really good because it is actually it's actually sections of poetry instead of being just a normally written novel. It's real short, but it is about what happens the day after this boy's brother is shot and killed, and it's a gang retaliation, and kind of that gang mentality that keeps them repeating the cycle where, you know, you've got to defend your family, and you have to retaliate against that, and it goes on and on and on. And on his way down the elevator, all of this happens in like 9 seconds or something like that. It starts at the first floor, and it's every floor a ghost from the past steps onto the elevator, and we get their stories too. And we see how this comes full circle and how the pattern just keeps repeating and repeating and repeating. The last line is so haunting that it just, I don't want to run it, but the last line that's said is what really brings it home, that this cycle just keeps repeating and repeating and repeating and is doomed to repeat and repeat and repeat. And this is something that happens in our inner cities all the time. These gang wars and just this death after death after death as retaliation for killing a member of their family. And the cycle just keeps repeating, and we've got to stop it at some point. So, very, very powerful book. The next book I listened to was We Are Okay by Nina LaCour, and this is a YA book. It deals with grief and with love and with loss, and how sometimes we don't know the full story behind things, and we don't always react the way people expect us to, or probably the right way. And I don't know that I want to say much more about this. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 5 stars. I thought it handled grief really well, especially in a young person. And I really enjoyed the story that we got with the 2 best friends that were actually ended up being lovers and then broke up. And how the grief of the loss of the main character's grandfather played a role in that. We're getting close to done here, guys. The next book that I read was actually another graphic novel, and that is Lumberjanes, Friendship to the Max, which is volume 2 of this series. And I gave it 5 stars because it is the cutest damn thing I've ever read. This is a group of girls off at camp, and they're learning how to navigate the world through friendship and through obstacles thrown at them. There's a little bit of sci-fi, fantasy type elements to it, but it really reminds me of Girl Scouts. And it just tugs at my heart. So I love these girls. So I really enjoy it. The artwork is great. Look at that. It's just great. Gave it 5 stars. The last book of July that I finished was The Remains of the Day by Kuzo Ishiguro, maybe. This one I gave 4 stars to. I really enjoyed it. This was one of my all-time favorite movies in the 90s, and it's still one of those movies that when it's on TV, I will stop and watch it if I'm flipping through channels. I just really loved this movie so much. It was a lot more political than I remembered it being, and so that was interesting. I need to go back and watch the movie, but we are getting this story from a butler of a home in England who has been the butler for the last 30 years, I want to say. Can't remember exactly. But he talks about his, the different people that he came in contact with, and then his story as he was traveling to go find the old head housekeeper, who there is obviously love between them that they just kind of failed to recognize or take action on when they were butler and head housekeeper. Really, so it's really also a love story, and there's a family dynamic of it too, because his father's involved, and yeah, I just really enjoyed this story a lot more than I thought I would. Well, like I said, I mean, not a lot more than I thought I would. I love the movie, so that doesn't surprise me, but the political aspects of it surprised me a lot. So that completes all the books that I did actually read and complete this month. So let's talk about my 2 DNFs. I decided to officially DNF The Way Station by Laurie Jameson. This book I started a couple years ago, and it just was pissing me off and pissing me off and pissing me off. And it's really highly religious, and it's a redemption arc. You can tell that as you're reading through this, but I don't think he needs a redemption arc. Even if it's in the afterlife, the main character of this book was a drug dealer who brutally killed his girlfriend. He was abusive, and then the other guy, another guy in there, the boyfriend of her best friend, helped cover up the murder, and it just, I just couldn't. And like I said, it was very religious. And I was going to finish reading it. I wanted to finish reading it so I could give a proper review for it, because I was sent this copy for review through Goodreads, and I can't do it because it just pisses me off. And I've got all of these places that I have marked are areas that were just so problematic that I had to mark it. 2 years later, and I can't pick it up to finish it, and I know that it would I just can't do it. Thinking about it is making me angry. So I'm officially DNFing that. I did go ahead and rate it 2 stars. I probably should have rated it 1, but I made it more than halfway through. I was probably 3/4 of the way through when I DNF'd it. The next book. This is The Life by Alex Shearer. I have no idea what this book is about. I made it 20 pages in and the 2 times that I picked it up to read it, I kept falling asleep. This was my book club book for last month, for July. It was actually our June book, but life happened and 2 of our 4 members couldn't make it to book club, so we pushed it off to July. So we had 2 months to read this book. 1 of us finished it. 2 of us didn't get 100 pages in because we were both falling asleep, and that included the person who picked the book this month. So it's about 2 brothers, and that's about all I know. I didn't like it. There were some problems with it too that kind of made it that way. I didn't care about the characters, and there were some sentences in here that were just really weird for the writing style, and I just couldn't get past them, which is really weird for me because I'm not a critical reader. So I just decided to go ahead and DNF it. I'm not interested in it, and the only reason I was reading it was for book club, and we've had it and we've talked about it already, so I don't care. So that's it for this wrap up. I know this is really super long, and I'm sorry, but it takes a while to talk about 24 books. So if you have read any of these books that I have, let me know in the comments below. What did you think of them? Did you have the same experience that I did with them? Did you love them? Did you hate them? You know, what were your thoughts on them? If you found any new books that you think you might want to pick up and read because of my wrap up, let me know that down below as well. And as always, please give me a thumbs up over there if you enjoyed this video. If not, go ahead and hit that thumbs down button. I'm okay with that too. And while you're over there, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you can be sure to be notified when I post new videos. And as I said before, be sure and leave me a comment down below. Even if it's just an emoji or just to say hello, that still helps me know that you were here, that you watched the video, and that I can interact with you in the comments. And until next time, I will talk to you later.